Here we are back again for another episode of the Leading Saints podcast. Now, this one's going to be a little bit different, so I wanted to insert an introduction here. If you remember, a few weeks ago, we released an episode with Jacob Hansen, who runs a platform online, mainly on YouTube, called Thoughtful Faith. And he had this topic about stake activity groups. He talked a little bit on his own channel. I invited him on to Leading Saints for a great interview about how a stake or ward, a local ward or stake, can gather individuals around specific interests to help stimulate connection, friendship, community. And it was a fantastic episode. So he had people listen to his episode about this concept, and there was a stake that actually tried this. So Jacob invited this group of individuals from the Long Beach East stake who actually attempted this, who got stake activity groups together and found a lot of success with it. And he had them on his podcast. And so I asked Jacob for the opportunity to rebroadcast his interview on the Leading Saints podcast as a phenomenal How I Lead episode. And so that's what we're doing. This is a rebroadcast of a great conversation between Jacob Hansen and members from the Long Beach East stake. Enjoy.
So I recently released a video on how interest-based groups at the stake level could help in a variety of ways to strengthen the saints and help us gather Israel. Recently, I was contacted by Joel Ward, who acts as the stake activities chair for the Long Beach East stake. He told me that my video had made quite the impact on their stake leadership, and that in the past few months, they had organized well over a dozen interest-based groups in their stake with great success. So I decided to invite Joel and a few other members of his stake on the show to discuss more. And Joel, do you want to kind of begin by giving a little bit of background about how you interacted with me and then came to talk to me?
Well, sure. We had a member of our stake activities committee in one of the wards. When we first announced what we were doing, he later followed up. Well, first of all, he was super excited about what we were doing, and then followed up with a video, which was your broadcast, and sent that to me. And I'm took a couple days before I finally got to it, and then pressed play, and like, oh wow, this is really good stuff. This is exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And I told him, hey, share this with the rest of the committee. This is great. I also sent it to our stake president, or the stake member of the stake presidency. A couple months later, I reached out to you as we, started off with 3 groups in May, went up to, 12 groups in June, 18 groups in July, and then 16 groups in August.
Wow.
So and it was just last month that you and I spoke.
That's awesome. So tell me, you're talking about these groups. Well, actually, let's take even one step before that. So I had made a video, just so everyone kind of knows, on the subject of these interest-based groups as sort of a way to solve a problem. Okay. Because I think a lot of us, I've served in a lot of different callings in the church. And one of the challenges, especially at the ward level, is getting people that share similar interests. I've worked with the youth, right? And so you have the 2 guys in your young men's quorum that are really into the sports. Maybe it's 4 guys, maybe it's even 5, but you have a few of those kids that aren't really into that. And so when the basketball thing is going on or whatever, they just don't feel like it's their thing. And then when you do other activities to try and help the kid that isn't into the sports, then the other kids aren't interested. And you have this issue of people just don't always share the same interests. They may share the same values. And so we in the church will often have people who share similar values with each other, but not necessarily similar interests. And so my video, for anyone who hasn't watched it, you should go check it out. But it's basically about the idea of creating interest-based groups at maybe a stake level or a regional level to try and get people together who share similar interests. And so it sounds like you guys have been doing something like that. Do any of you want to speak a little bit to like what you guys have been doing? Maybe you, Joel, since you've been kind of over that.
Actually, Janet Larson. Janet, you've been doing this for how many years?
At least 5 or 6 years. The yoga class has kind of expanded from just our ward to become the stake. And then we had the opportunity to invite all the women from the stake. And it's been a tremendous asset to everybody that participates. So,
so you guys doing this? Are you guys doing this like every month, every 2 weeks? What's kind of the rhythm to this yoga group that gets together?
Every Friday morning, so weekly. And we became such good friends that in May we decided to go on a yoga retreat. And we went overnight to a family home. We went and did all the spa stuff, all the yoga stuff. We got up 5:15 in the morning and went and did sunrise yoga on a hill next to the house, and actually had the moon setting to the west and the sun rising at the east. Ended up, going to a garden, and we went to a place called the Lake Shrine of Self-Realization, which is a yoga based garden at a lake that for meditation. And it actually honored the 5 major religions, and there was a picture of Christ in their temple. So that was pretty impressive to me, that they're how inclusive they were. And it was just a bonding experience for us, and they'll be my friends forever now. They're gonna be in my heart forever, unless of course I get Alzheimer's, but that may not happen.
Well, I gotta say though, that it's funny that you're talking about that and what were the ages of the women that were on this retreat with you?
The youngest was 20, the oldest was 80.
That's awesome. And so
very, very amazing.
And so you're able to get people together that are members of the church, Latter-day Saints, to participate together in something and to create a level of sisterhood that maybe wouldn't exist if there wasn't this shared interest. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, very, very true. That here they come together and they interact with the same interest, kind of like what you're talking about. It gives us the opportunity to have anybody who's interested come. And we've had people from all of the wards come. People come and go, except for one. We've only had one ward that hasn't sent anybody. So I don't know.
That's great. Well, so I know that there's other people in here that run different groups. So I guess we'll kind of start by just talking about some of these groups and what they've done. My understanding, Colleen, do you lead some groups, or do you have any involvement? What's kind of your involvement in this?
Yeah, I love that Joel I think sent out an interest survey, like what are your talents and interests, and then he called and he said, "Hey, Colleen, I see that you paddleboard on Saturdays, and I go to Disneyland on Wednesday mornings with a girlfriend, and I what else do I do? I do scripture buddies. We follow President Emily Bell Freeman has an Inklings group. It's an institute class that she does that is general conference talks and scriptures, and we host a small group. And you know what's really cool is just today I got a text from someone that says, "Hey, I just moved into the Atherton ward, which is in our state, and I see that you host the paddleboard group, and my husband and I would love to join you next week." And I thought, isn't that great? She just moved here. She got the email, and then she just reached out to me.
That's great. So you guys, so is it, I mean, I'm just thinking to go into a stake and be like, you guys have like a menu of like all these cool things that people in your stake are doing that anyone can just join in on? Is that sort of the program here?
And Joel is spearheading that.
That's awesome.
Yes, it comes out in our monthly bulletin.
That's fantastic.
And the reason why we have the monthly bulletin was I spoke with the person that has been doing an interest-based group for 9 years, and it's the women's fitness, and she does it 3 times a week. It's a really good.
That's a strong program.
And I just asked her, what are the issues? What was your most difficult thing getting this up and running? And she indicated that communication is key. I'm just one person, and having, I could send out so many emails to Relief Society presidents throughout the state. But when you have now a whole activities committee and the ward reps are assisting, and it goes out in the state bulletin, that makes a world of difference. And so as an activities committee, we just support the group leaders. And what guides us, anyone can start a group as long as it follows the Article of Faith number 13. That's the guidelines.
That's fantastic. So basically, if I'm understanding this correctly, in your guys' stake, what you guys have set up is kind of a bottom-up approach where you say to the members, hey, Colleen, if you love to paddleboard and you're really passionate about this, would you be willing to well, I guess you don't even have to ask her necessarily. You just say, if anybody wants to run an interest-based activity group that gets Latter-day Saints together to be able to do something that they're passionate about, that's kind of what you guys are facilitating at the stake level. Is that kind of the way it should be understood?
Yes, Latter-day Saints and people of other faiths, and it's something that they're already doing in their normal routine anyway.
Yeah.
Colleen, that's what you love doing, is paddleboarding. You love going to Disneyland every week, every Wednesday morning before the crowds get there, and the fact that you've opened it up, what's that been like since you opened it up to the state?
It's so amazing. I didn't know so many people, were interested in paddleboarding, and I didn't know so many people were interested in Disneyland. We went to Disneyland, my girlfriend and I, with looks like we got some feedback, but we went to Disneyland with another older couple, much older, right? They're in their little scooters, and they had their matching shirts on, and we went on their favorite ride, and we just really enjoyed them. And another gentleman moved from Utah to California. He's new in the state, and he came, and I was someone else who had never been paddleboarding. I have a lot of paddleboards, John and I, and so we brought extra equipment for people if they don't have paddleboards, so they can try it out and see how they like it, and we can give them tips. And I'm really surprised because Lori, I was out of town in Texas, and my friend Lori went to Disneyland without me, by herself, and she ran into the old couple, the Pettits that we had gotten to know better while we were at Disneyland, and so she hung out with them, and when she saw them at Disneyland. So wasn't that fun?
That's fantastic. Now, John, I'm not leaving you out here. I do want. So you're involved with the you're the high counselor in the stake over the activities. What's been your observation in all this? What are your thoughts on it?
I also work with the Communications Council, and I have single adults under my purview. And I work with two members of the stake presidency. Single adults is a different member from communications and activities. And we're, trying to figure out, since COVID, what the best method to move forward was. And we came up with the idea of instituting a single adult / senior members subcommittee on the activities committee. And, working with Joel and I work hand in hand, and working with Joel, we got them in there, and then we started brainstorming and talking about different things. And one of the ideas was, let's do an interest survey, find out what people want to do so that we can help match people up. A lot of times you're not going to have someone in your ward that has the same interests as you are. But usually within a stake, you're going to find at least one other person or more that have similar interests. And matching those people together so that they can develop friendships in the gospel and based on their activities is important. So that was the impetus for starting and moving forward on this journey.
Yeah, and it's funny that so one of the things I noticed when I was as a youth is that most of the time I would feel more camaraderie and brotherhood with the guys on my football team than I would with the guys in my priest quorum, right? I think that's a pretty common experience. Now, I shared the same values as the guys in my priest quorum and maybe not with my football team, but we shared different interests, right? And the real magic, I think, happens when you get that crossover between interests and values. That's where people really connect with each other in a deep way. And I think what's so cool, especially what you were talking about, Janet, with this yoga group, is that the kind of experience that you're talking about is the kind of thing that when we were youth, we remember those, the Boy Scout camp or the girls camp or whatever it was. And those were they were great bonding experiences with those who did it. And the fact that you were able to create a group that provided that sort of an experience to adults, I mean, that's really something special to be able to do that.
You're right. Can I kind of give you some history on how these special interest, they call it interest-based groups?
Yeah.
Back in 2007, it was the general president was Bonnie Parkin, and they sent out in 2007 in the Ensign March, home, family, and personal enrichment. And they set up this whole thing where they said, we want to have these activities, enrichment activities, and we want specialists to be collect those sisters who are interested in the same thing as they are, just exactly like what Colleen does. She's interested in paddleboarding. Just share that and open that up and have other people go. So they talk in the incident about how the needs and the wants of the sisters determine what activities they're doing. And in the Ensign, they talk about how in Nigeria, they made soap was one of the things that apparently was not available locally. And they learned how to make soap and bread. They made bread so that they could actually use it for the sacrament. Mexico, they taught people how to cut their hair. So all of these little groups, special interests, but I think that was the beginning of how we evolved. So through the Relief Society, setting that up as as actual request from the general board to say, let's set up these activity groups. And then I know in our ward, we have those. We've got book clubs, we have exercise groups, we have yoga, we've got paddleboard, all of those initiated under the Relief Society, and then expanded out to opening it up to everybody that was interested to come. Less just Relief Society, but
and how easy is it to invite someone who's not a member of the faith, but who loves Disneyland, to come with a bunch of Latter-day Saints to go to Disneyland together and to make friends, right? Or to go to yoga. Or now Joel, though, I would imagine that the thing is as I've talked about this idea with different people, the pushback that I get a lot of the times, and that a lot of people feel, you're someone in your stake thinking this sounds really cool, is that the leadership at the top are kind of like, this is going to be like some big thing that's going to take up a lot of that work. What is your response to maybe leaders or other people, especially with you being in the stake activities chair? What's your sort of word to those people who might have doubts about something like this?
What work is there? It's actually a lot less work than trying to do a big stake activity. It's the people that are interested take the initiative and make it happen. The activities, we just communicate what people have wanted to do. And that's as an activities committee, we kind of divvy up the responsibilities. We got ward reps. And they just, once a month contact the activity group leaders and was like, hey, do you need to change anything in the bulletin? Does it need to come out? So it's really, really simple to manage. Getting it started, having to do the survey.
Tell me about that survey. So let me kind of just go through this. Like, tell me about sort of the way that this is organized in the specific within your stake, so that people that maybe want to get a little bit more into the specifics, like, how did you guys organize it?
Okay. We follow the church handbook, and in the handbook for any activity, the key is as leaders, we want to be able to understand people's interests and people's talents, and people's needs. And so there's the old talent and interest survey. I have it right here, paper version. We did a little Google form, and sent that out to the stake and encouraged all the members to complete that survey. That was our initial step. The second thing that we did was contact the people that indicated that they were interested in sharing their talents or becoming a group leader. And hey, would you like to organize it? This is the support that we would offer. All you have to do is just organize the date, time, location, and the event. We'll take care of the communication. It's actually been quite surprising how many people have responded. We did try the little form you had suggested. One person filled that out, only because they insisted on filling it out. Everyone else, it was through conversations. And we came up with a little graphic design to help promote their group.
And so you have like a rep within each ward that kind of represents, it's kind of the one who's it's kind of in on the plot, as it were, to like, hey, somebody in our ward has some interest. Like, have you ever thought about starting a group? Is that sort of the idea here, is that you have these people that can kind of help communicate what this kind of program and vision is at each ward level?
That's exactly it. And sometimes if the ward rep isn't quite sure how to handle it, they just refer them back to me.
That's awesome.
And then we have a link tree that lists all the groups and then the support and how to start a group.
Oh, that's great. So I know my stake has a stake website, and I've always thought, like, how cool would it be to just right on my stake website have activities? You just hit it and it's like all these different things that, like, what are you into? Like, you can gather with the saints and do that. And I think, so for me, there's like the vision of this in my mind falls under this idea of gathering the saints, right? It's like, all right, we hear about gathering the saints. Well, gather us to do what? I think we do a good job of gathering the saints together to partake of the sacrament and do things like that. And that's good. Like, yes, 100% all about that. But when we also gather around things that we just enjoy and already do, like paddleboarding or yoga or fly fishing or backpacking or whatever, it's like I just feel like there's a magic in that people don't realize, because we always think about, I think sometimes we underestimate the power of activities on a spiritual level, and we think that they're just for mere entertainment. And I think it's just wrong. Go ahead, Colleen.
I also had an experience that I wasn't expecting. I felt like I should host a Scripture Buddies study group. Emily Bell Freeman had asked people, can you host a small group, general conference study group, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I could never do that because I can't remember scriptures very well, right? But the still small voice said, Colleen, you should really do that. And I'm like, well, I travel a lot, so it would have to be on Zoom. But I still was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And then it just kept nagging at me. And I'm like, the first two, so I decided to do it, and nobody really joined, just a couple people in the beginning. And the second episode was hideous because I put them on YouTube, and it was so horrible I wanted to cry at the end, like hideous. And this is my second. Now it's open to our whole state, and then people from all over the country have joined. And it's because people, word of mouth and say, hey, you should join. Now we have like 15 people that join to talk about Christ on Zoom every week. And it's like my favorite thing to do besides working in the temple. So it's just interesting. And now it's comfortable and fun. And my friend co-hosts it with me that goes to Disneyland with me. And she's not an active member of the church, but I met her at Disneyland the day after the horrible episode. And I just said, I wish somebody would just talk about the conference talks and scriptures. She says, I'll do it with you. And literally she got the workbook and she does it with me. And now we have 15 people that join across the whole country. And Fred Putnam from our stake, he's joined now. And so it was just women, and now we have men. I just feel like it could be something you're scared to death to do too. It doesn't have to be something that you're already doing. Like I was scared to death, but you get that recurring voice in your head saying, hey, well, I should do that, right? And I think we need to lean into some of those things too, because I'm actually learning the most.
That's awesome. No, I think I think that it's just about sort of getting a new mentality about what these activities are for. We're so used to sort of top down, just, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is when we're going to do it. And you kind of pray people show up. And it comes and it puts a ton of extra work on like leaders, where if you go to people and say, what do you love? Like, then they'll jump right in. John, do you have something you want to add?
I was going to say, one of the things that we really emphasized on this was that it needed to be grassroots. We don't want leadership pushing it down. We want people bringing it up. So it makes it so that leadership doesn't have to do a ton. Joel does a lot in, putting together the flyers and stuff like that. But once he's done it and, he makes a few changes each month, there's not a lot that the leadership has to do. It's helping join people together with common interests and letting them run with the ball. We're not telling them what to do. We're not telling them when to do it, where to do it. It's what they're excited about. And it takes a life of its own.
And that's something that from the very beginning, when I was thinking about this, was if people already have a pre-existing passion, like we need to tap into the passions that people already have, because a passionate person, like if I call someone, I give you the assignment, like, okay, you're going to do this thing. It may or may not be what you're passionate about, but we need you to do it. You're going to get a very different level of commitment than if you get someone who like I love jujitsu. If the stake was like, hey, do you want to do a jujitsu night? Like at the church, once a month or something, I'd be like, I'm there. I'll run it. I have a bunch of ideas already because I already have a passion for it, right?
I think it's really exciting when you find somebody that has your same passion. And just instantaneously you're bonding. It doesn't matter what it is, but you're like, oh my gosh, you like that too? Oh, you're just like me in one way, even though we're different in every other way. And I think you can build on those kind of relationships to really have deeper friendships.
And that what you just said, I think you said the key word, relationships. I think that there's a relationship you can have with shared values, and that's good. But there's another level of relationship that you have with people who share your interests. That's why most people, you're right, you love the people you go to church with. You think wonderful things about them because they share your interests. But you don't necessarily hang out with them on the weekend because they just aren't into the things that you're into. But when you find someone that's both, that's that person in your ward that, like my buddy Skylar, I've been friends with my friend Skylar since we were 5 years old, right? Like we have super similar interests, both members of the church, and lifelong friendships, right? And so it's just super powerful when you get those two together. And we do such a good job in the church of getting people together who share similar values like no doubt. But like all of us in this call, I think we all share similar values, but we might not all share similar interests, right? And I think that's just such a cool thing. Joel, I saw you looking to make a comment.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier, this really is all about gathering Israel. And you do that through activities, and interest-based activities just really works. My mom, she's 82 years old, and she started she just is really passionate about machine embroidery. And she started this group, and I tell you, it's really helped. We got about 10 people that come or 6 to 10 people. It just depends on the week. It's every Saturday, and she looks forward all week long preparing for that group. And the sisters that come and that participate in that group, one was investigating the church with her family, and after 6 months just kind of stopped, but she started coming to this, and I don't know if she'll join the church. That doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but it
isn't the point of the group.
Yeah,
It's just, absolutely.
Just have those relationships and let the Spirit, guide. Another one was a person that just doesn't come regularly. Well, she's now coming to these activity groups, and now she's starting to attend other women's activities in our ward because of this similar interest-based group. And what it's done for my mom, she is just psychologically, emotionally, she has greater purpose now, if you will. My dad has thanked me a couple times for starting this, or inviting my mom to start this group, and her actually accepting and doing it because of how it's impacted her personally.
Yeah. And I like to say everyone has a passion. Everyone has a passion. And if you're able to get them the chance to exercise that passion and include others who share in it, like beautiful things happen. We talk in the church about sort of the paradox to a certain degree of unity and diversity, right? And I think to a certain extent, that's the sort of values is where we unite as saints, right? Moral truths, right and wrong. Our values are centered on who Jesus Christ is, but we are diverse in our interests and in our talents. And so having the ability to, I think, get those two kind of engines firing. I mean, it sounds like you guys are having great experiences with it. I know that when I have had my best experiences in the church, they generally have been around where those things come together, right? Where people aren't just, and talking about stuff is great. We do a lot of getting together and talking in the church, but when you're doing stuff, like I'm going to actually tomorrow morning, I'm getting up and I'm driving up to the young men's camp for the stake. And those are always so special because they're about doing things with people. And for young men, it's not to say every young man loves to be in the outdoors, but the majority of them enjoy camping, the vast majority. And so when you get a bunch of young men who enjoy camping with a bunch of men who enjoy camping, and you all get together in the woods and you hike and you swim and you get on boats and have adventures, like cool stuff happens because those relationships occur. And I just think it's so cool that you guys are sort of doing this on another, because I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling on this, but I tried to think of like, what is it about those things that work so well and worked so well for me? What was it? Like, why did those do so well? And how do we replicate that over and over? And I found that it was this interest thing. Any other thoughts on certain, I don't know, benefits that you guys have seen from these sorts of groups getting together?
I feel like, go ahead, Janet. No, Janet, go.
Okay. So there's two thoughts to why these are so effective. The first is when you go to church, we're down to 2 hours, and you go there and you sit in your chair and listen, participate slightly in the second hour, but really you are not interacting with people. I mean, you hear their comments, you feel that common bond. We have the same values and the same interest in being there, but you're not making one-on-one relationships. And the other thing is the small interest groups, they're usually small enough that you can interact, right? It's not 100 people all thrown in a room. Like Colleen's got 15, or I've got 10 or 12, whatever it is. They're manageable groups where you get to know everybody in that group instead of just being one of 100 people. And I think that's really the most effective way for us to build those relationships, the bonds, the friendships.
Absolutely. Colleen.
I also feel like that is true. We don't have much time to interact with people at church. People have callings, right? We're a volunteer-based church, so people are running to do their callings. But I also feel like in our society in general, people feel very isolated and lonely and disconnected, especially, with cell phones. And I feel like people feel loneliness is really on the rise, and isolation. And I feel like when you go paddleboarding, when you go to Disneyland, even when we talk about scriptures where it's just this smaller group of people, right? It is a different dynamic. And literally, I didn't really know most of these other people before these groups started, right? And when I watched your video last night, I'm like, did that guy come here and know what we were doing? Like, it's just the crazy thing that you described. Like, oh my God, Zach knows what we're doing here. And the cool thing is those sisters that I do scripture and conference study talk with, I'm in love with these sisters. I pray for them by name. I'm so connected. They're all across, different areas and age groups, and we're at different seasons sometimes in life. But, I feel like even though it's a Zoom thing and I text them and email them, and we have a question that we study every week, and I just feel like, and then when we paddleboard, and I met that guy I met, and then Joel came paddleboarding, and another guy in my ward that I grew up with, his younger brother, but he's moved back to our area, and he showed up and tried out paddleboarding, and I just feel like it just gives you that connection, and you don't feel that isolation and that loneliness when you're connected. And I feel like for me, I'm in a season where I ask myself, what would I love every day? What would I love? And that's why my things are centered around fun things, because I'm really about having fun now. And it's just fun to have fun and laugh with other people. And I just feel like we're reducing, the alonement is what Satan wants. He wants us to feel separate and different. And Heavenly Father, Jesus wants us to feel atonement, at one-ment, right, with each other. And I feel like we're taking the adversary and just his alonement idea, and we're kind of dismantling that, because it's really very different to walk into a chapel, right? Especially if you're not from our faith, or if you've not been active in a while and you're coming back to church, it's a very long walk from your car to the chapel, right? But it's pretty easy to show up on the sand at the beach and say, hey, let's hop on the water and get wet and paddleboard, right? And I just feel like, I don't know, it's just a different way of connecting and showing love for each other. And
one other benefit.
Oh,
sorry.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, one other benefit is the zone leaders for our stake. I spoke with them just 2 nights ago, and they requested 100 copies to distribute to all the missionaries in the stake. And those copies contain a calendar for the month of August of all the different activities that are taking place throughout the week. And sometimes there's not a day of the week except Sunday, but Monday through Saturday, there's always something anyone can participate in. And then we also list all the activity groups, their leaders, and when they meet at the bottom. That's just something that we just started to replace the sign-up sheets that we were passing around the second hour. Could you imagine 18 groups and each one having a sign-up sheet and the logistics. It just wasn't working. We appreciate the state council and their input on how we could refine things and handle the logistics a little bit better.
Well, that's
I do also want to say that I think the what they do as far as sending out emails to everybody in the stake works much better than having people have to remember or think to go to the stake website.
I see. And I think, I mean, we always talk about, the missionaries, right? What is a new member need, or an investigator, right? They need a friend. They need friends in the church. Well, friendships are generally based around interests, right? I become friends with the guy in my ward who also happens to like jujitsu, right? And then he invites me to go to his gym with him and to roll. And so it's like, oh, wow. Like, suddenly I don't feel so alone. There's somebody who's like me in the church. And I think that the opportunity in these sorts of, again, it's so funny. It's just a simple change in focus. It's just a simple change to, let's stop trying to push from the top. And why don't we pull out the good that's already in our members, their righteous passions and interests that they have, because other people will connect with them on that basis. And we all have that. We all know that we have that. And so whether you're an 80-year-old grandmother, right? Or great grandmother by that point, or you are a young woman who's in my seminary class who loves to rock climb. Like, to have a stake rock climbing group, I mean, she'd be there so fast, make your head spin. And then what? She goes on an overnight, rock climbing trip with a bunch of other people in the stake who love to do that. And like, they have a little fireside or something. Like, that'd be magical.
What's interesting in our stake, even though anyone can start an activity group, it has been the singles and the senior saints and those that are 31 and over that have started these groups. And then there was also quite a bit of existing groups that I was completely unaware of, that many of them decided to open it up to the stake as well. So that this is already going on in stakes throughout the church. It's just, is it really publicized, and is it supported?
I mean, I can think in my stake, and I bet there's a whole bunch of these all over the church, and it's a pickleball group. They get together and they play pickleball. Oh. And I'd imagine you guys might have something like that.
Well, yeah. So pickleball, that was actually, it was not on the old survey that the church put out. But we left an open-ended, question, and that was the number one. I mean, you had over a dozen people write in pickleball.
Yeah, you start a pickleball group, and it will take off fast. That's happening
in all three buildings. And in the La Salle ward, the Relief Society president there has just done a phenomenal job getting groups organized for her ward long before the state started these. They just have so many groups in that ward. Janet, you were part of that. You were part of the Relief Society presidency right before this calling, and you were probably part of getting those groups started.
Yeah, they have. She's a dynamo, and she, watercolor and balance, anything she can think of that assessing the needs of the members of the ward. She's has asked somebody, "Oh, can you take this on? Can you take this on?" And I know this is a talent of yours. You paint watercolors. Would you mind teaching others? You have this. You're trained as in exercise. Can you help people with their chair, arm strengthening and balance work? So she's constantly, okay, let's go and let's start walking once a week from the pier to the restaurant. and she said, go on, let's go on the boat ride. So she really has been amazing on trying to get these many interest groups set up.
Now,
Sometimes it's helpful to be asked to say, okay, if there's somebody who won't volunteer, even though it's on the sheet, but somebody who is in a position to say, I think you could do this, with some encouragement. It's not really top down, but the asking,
It does require a little. It is bottom up, but having that leader, like the Relief Society president, or me or somebody else calling, hey, would you like to do this? And we're going to provide support. That, I think, is key. That's essential for these to get up and running.
Yeah, and I think getting up and running, I would imagine that's it. I'd imagine once there's a culture where people understand that it's possible to do these kinds of things, I could see people being more willing. But this is very outside of the sort of norm that most people are used to, where it's sort of like everything top down, nothing ever bottom up. Where this, now I will say this though, how would you answer those who maybe have concerns about, whoa, like this feels a little bit like out of control. Like we need to have better control over it from the top down, because what if somebody goes paddleboarding and they get hurt or something like that? Have you guys had to deal with any of those sorts of concerns?
No, not yet.
Well, to a certain extent, I've always. Well, go ahead.
So, Janet mentioned, the General Relief Society presidency, encouraging this years ago. Our North America West Area presidency just recently had a singles conference for 275 stakes. It was the Abundant Life Conference. And they encouraged groups to be organized among the singles throughout the North America West area. We ended up with over 200 groups, and we were meeting online. So this has been around for a while, allowing the bottom up. I think Joseph Smith said it best, that teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves.
Yeah, and I've in my video, I kind of stressed this too, is I kind of felt like you guys, I think this is like some people were asking, well, like as if this was some new program. And I kind of because I've listened to people sort of kind of come at this idea, because I put it out there, but it was sort of like, I think this fits within our existing framework. Like we're supposed to put on activities already, right? Like, is there something in our handbook that says, oh, you can't go and organize a paddleboard activity? Like, no. And so there's a certain, or do a yoga group or something like that. It's like, no, I think those things I don't think you got to call Salt Lake for every possible thing. Now I understand there's certain things that maybe need that, but I think in general, we're supposed to be out doing activities, and that we should move forward with them.
I think we've been commanded to let your light so shine before men that they can see your good works. Look at what Sister Larson's been doing for so many years. Look at Sister Lowe. It's through your talents that you've been given so it's essential that we do this.
Well, what about, I'll bring up a concern, you can shoot it down, because I don't think it's a great concern, but people say, well, why not do these things just outside the church, right? Like why make this a church thing? If you want to go and like do a yoga group, go do a yoga group in some local club to do it. Like why are you doing this through the church?
They are outside the church. We're just giving a framework to advertise them and to invite people to come and join them. It's not, the church isn't pushing it. It's the people who are interested in doing those activities that are pushing it. We're just helping them out.
It was kind of under the aegis of the Relief Society originally, that we were instructed to have these special interest groups. So I think it kind of has broadened the base, but that's kind of where it comes from. So it was part of the plan. But the other thing I mentioned is we have been kind of a culture of, you get a calling. You don't seek for a position. You don't seek for leadership, right? You get called to those. And that is a different approach to it, to say, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to do, instead of, you get called to be over,
And I'm a big believer in callings for things that need callings. But
right.
I believe that having an activity leaders that are called to facilitate this, that's fine. But the people who actually need to do the activities, you can go to the people beneath you and say, hey, I'm over this, but I'm looking for people who want to do this. And then you can do it. One last thing that I just want to address with what you brought up, John, and you're right, they are already doing this. And what I think the real beautiful thing by having it happen within the church is you're gathering together saints. That's the difference. I can go gather with the world doing this, but when we gather with people who share our values and then we invite people to join with us, I think that's a very powerful principle that we sometimes lose, but that I think in the early church was understood. When you gather the saints together, there's a specialness to that principle, and interests can act as points that we can gather saints around.
So on each one of these groups, they each have a flyer or a graphic image that could be shared on social media. And it actually has the Long Beach East Stake, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And when you have the missionaries, full-time missionaries, oh, you're interested in yoga? Look. And so from a statewide basis, everyone's supporting one another. We do help gather Israel. And that's what it's all about. And another scripture is, we don't have to be commanded in all things.
Yeah.
This just, so whatever you're interested in, go for it. Let your light shine.
I think it's beautiful.
One of the, I know Janet's talked about Monty Park several times. Yes, that happened. We weren't aware of that when we started discussing this. And this is, the Lord inspiring us to move forward on this path. We're all entitled to inspiration and to follow the promptings that we get. Heavenly Father wants us to gather his children, whether they're in the church or outside the church. And these activity groups are a way that, people can develop relationships with others in the gospel and bring their friends to activities. Like you said, their friends probably have the same likes that they do, to bring their friends somewhere else other than, hey, you want to come to church with me? That's pretty scary to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But when we bring people to activities and events, and that's one of the things we've worked on as an activities committee and group in the state, is putting together events that we can invite our friends to who are not yet members of the church, and that they can learn and understand us better and ask questions.
Yeah.
Where it's not threatening.
And I've often said, like, if they join, great. If they don't, great. Either way, exactly. I've made a new friend. I've bonded with another human being. I've helped reduce loneliness in the world. I've shared in something that's lovely and of good report with others. Like, the goal of this, I think that people will join the church because of these sorts of things. Like, we all know that people, when they participate and gather with the saints, they'll feel the Spirit, but that's not the intention. That's the side effect of loving your fellow man. And I think that by sharing your talents and times with other people about things that you really care about and that you love, I think that just wonderful things happen. And I think it's so cool what you guys are doing.
Well, Jacob, when you mentioned jiu-jitsu, the first thing that came through my mind, the prompting that I'd received, was one of my close friends also loves jiu-jitsu. He had been investigating the church for 6 months with his wife and 2 kids, and that's what he does on a weekly basis. I'm like, you know what? I need to see if he would like to start an activity group. And even though he's not LDS,
yep,
it's okay. We would welcome any of our friends to start these activity groups. You don't have to be a member to start a group, and the stake will go ahead and support it.
Yeah. No, I think it's beautiful. Now, as we get kind of to wrapping this up, I know there's a lot of people that are listening and saying, this sounds really cool. I mean, I want to do this in my stake. Like, this would be so great. What would you say to somebody like that, Joel, who maybe is a normal member of a stake, who is really excited on this idea? Like, what are your thoughts of what they can do to maybe help make something like this happen?
It's got to be personalized to that stake, and it's got to come, they have to have support. So it's sharing this video and your previous one with the stake presidency, and maybe the three, some resources such or examples, having an example of a stake like ours that's already doing it. So maybe potentially with this broadcast, if you would share the, our stake bulletin, our stake survey, talent and interest survey, and our stake activities group link tree with all the groups listed on there. There's a model that they can look at and then customize it to fit the needs of their stake.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've often thought with people, like, anytime you want to start something, don't try and start big, just a couple of groups. You know what I mean? Like, if you know a couple of people that go and say, hey, we just would like to do this thing, this other stake's doing it, and you get approval as sort of the guinea pig to try it out, and then it goes well, start small. I don't think starting a yoga group in a stake is something that should if someone is really uptight about that, it's like, and that's going to be hard. I mean, I just don't know what you're going to do with that. But it doesn't take a ton of resources to do some of these things. And like you're saying, they're already happening. I know that every Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, when I go to teach seminary, there's a group of guys there playing basketball. And there's people playing pickleball, I know, at certain times. And again, it's just like, all we're really doing is integrating that into some sort of a stake activity thing to help allow others to know that they're welcome. And if they have ideas like this, that we can gather people. I mean, is that basically the vision?
Yes.
Awesome. John.
A couple things. Stake activities doesn't mean the stake has to produce all the activities. It's just, we invite everybody in the stake. The other thing is, if someone hears this and they're interested, hey, who do you know? Who do you know that likes pickleball? Who do you know that likes yoga? Who do you know that wants to study the scriptures more? In whatever they're interested in, go and start asking their leaders, and hopefully they can say, well, you might want to talk to this person or that person, and don't just limit it to your ward. Look in the stake, or look in the stake next door. The more people you have, the synergy of having more people makes it go better. It's like Colleen kind of said earlier, that the second time she did Scripture Buddies, she talked for an hour. And after she finished that one, she said to me, I can't do this because I can't talk for an hour every time. And then after that, she talked to her friend that she goes to Disneyland with, and she said, oh, I'll co-host it with you. And so she's been on every time. But over time, it's evolved and taken off. We're going to experience some discouragement sometimes, but you push through it, fail forward.
Awesome. Joel.
John had mentioned a point that probably needs to be elaborated on. There is a difference between stake activities and activity groups. Stake activities, they got a budget. Stake activities committee is, putting it on. An activity group, that's the bottom up. There's no budget. The group leader determines the frequency, the time, the location, and they can stop doing it at any time. So there's some differences between, again, the stake activity and the stake activity group.
And in these groups, just as a point of clarification, because they're being run by an activity group leader, the group leader kind of runs it. You just help let people know, hey, just so you know, there is someone in our stake who is extending an open invitation to everybody who wants to, because Brother Hansen said that every other Tuesday, he's going to be hosting a jiu-jitsu open roll for anybody who's interested at the stake center. And he's going to bring the mats and have everything that you need to do it. And you guys are just letting everybody know. And then those people show up. And all of a sudden, before we know it, we have 3 non-members. And I know one in particular in my gym who I know I would invite if we had that. And he would show up and he would get to know the saints. And I honestly think he'd get baptized. Like, I genuinely just believe that, just because he's talked to me about certain things. And I know that if he met a bunch of members of the church, it would be an amazing experience for him. And I know he loves jiu-jitsu. So it would be like, it'd be a way to connect him to us in a great way.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jen. Go, Jen.
So we're planning to go on a hike in August, and as part of a training hike, 3 of us went to a different place to go hiking, and we met up with a really, really, really nice Korean hiking group. And I had taken along some flyers and invited them to come with us. And one of the women that wants to come was not really proficient or didn't feel comfortable speaking in English, although she was able to communicate very well. But when I came back, I reached out to one of our members in our ward who's from Korea and said, could you possibly come on this hike with us so this woman would feel like more comfortable being there, because she would not be worried that she couldn't communicate. You know, there's a snake or whatever it is, right? That she would know the word for. But so here we are connecting people from here, you know, not from different organizations or different groups together through these little activities that we're doing. And it's very powerful.
So cool. So cool. You were going to say something, Colleen?
I think you do need to have someone like a Joel that is willing to create it's just a little square advertisement. It has a QR code and it takes you to the link tree, because it makes it so easy when the newsletter comes out that you can just click on it and find out everything about it. And like, literally, I was just getting dinner ready for tonight at home, and I got this nice text from this lady saying, we want to come. And so I do think you do need to have someone that Joel just reached out to me and said, hey, Colleen, does this look good? What are the details? He made the cute thing. Then he did a Zoom with me and we reviewed it. It took about 10 minutes. And I told him, hey, tweak this or do this. And so it just took a few minutes, but you do need to have a point person like Joel and John, because I know they work together. And that does the thing for Janet. Because I'm sure he reached out to Janet too, and just gets it all one person that makes it organized, if that makes sense.
Well,
Joel is amazing.
I was about to say, I think Joel here is kind of a bit of a hero. We all need to pray for lots of Joels.
No, the key is with those. I mean, we have the paper versions, and you know, the group leaders can request those, and we'll print them now in color. We just got a color copier to go in the stake center on Thursday.
Nice.
Just got approval from the state clerk to put it in his office, and it'll also print color posters for our monthly posters that go up in the buildings. And this is to replace the second hour sheets that weren't working well. Actually worked very well. It just the teachers felt sorry for.
I'm just thinking of it like, just have a thing in the bulletin board with just like all of these different groups that you can do with just like the contact person for each one. I mean, it's like a menu of like, are you bored? Like, here, we have a million things for you to do. You want to meet other people that love what you love? Like, here's the list.
I would love to see another, 24 activities added. I mean, we're missing surfing. We're missing a book club at the stake level. We're missing, jiu-jitsu, just all the different, more narrow interests. We could really use a lot more of those. And I think we'll have a lot more. Today, I was introduced to a person. He loves motorcycles. He just moved into the stake. It's like, hey, would you like to start a motorcycle club?
Yeah.
And it was another one I spoke with today. For years, he's been doing scuba diving, and like, hey, would you, and again, I asked the question, both kind of declined, but you can always ask.
Yeah. If someone has a passion for something, a lot of times they are willing. I know that, I mean, one of my dear friends now is someone who is a part member family, and he wasn't a member, but his son was about to get into the youth program in the church, and he would come to church with us with his wife and son on Sunday, and we asked him to, would you help with the youth, like just go on the campouts and things like that, and he said, yeah, I'll do that. And so within 6 months, he got baptized. I mean, it was like he just had such a good experience. And if he didn't, that's fine. It isn't like that, but the Spirit converts. But if we can provide people with a chance to be around people that have the Spirit with them so that they can feel it, that's always a positive thing to people to do. And to the stake leaders out there, I think you guys actually, what's wild is you guys have gone and been more ambitious about this than I even like. I'm always like, whoa, start small, try this and that. You guys have really run with this. But to anyone who's watching this, I guess what my thing is this, and I've said this in the original video and I'll say it again here. This isn't a particular program. How you guys do it in your stake, how another stake does it, that's not what's important here, because the local leaders in their situation, wherever they may be, they need to figure out, how are we going to do this in our stake? Okay. But there are principles here that I think are the thing that are important. And the principles are gathering together the saints around their interests, because interests actually do matter. And then the other one is this idea, the principle of a bottom-up approach, not feeling like tapping into existing passions rather than trying to, hey, we're going to give you this thing to do, right? Not to say that you can't invite people like you guys have, obviously, but I think with those principles in mind, and with stories like yours that you guys have shared here, and even when we think about our own experiences, I just think that there is so much potential in these principles if people will be willing to sort of look for the way within their stake context to implement them. And I think it just could lead to some great things. Any final thoughts?
Our stake presidency also said, hey, let's go slow. But because it's bottom up, it was really quite interesting how fast it grew. Again, in May, when you check out our bulletins, May was the first bulletin. We had 3, and then it went up to 12 in June, in July 18, and then in August down to 16.
That's amazing.
So it's constantly changing, new groups. And
I just think that's so cool. And I think that when people see the experiences that come out of these things, I think that's the other thing, is we have to share the kind of experiences that you guys shared today. Because when people realize, like, whoa, this is more than just people on the surface level, it's just people getting together to do something they enjoy. But when people get together to do things they enjoy, like go hiking, all of a sudden some woman who is uncomfortable because she can't speak good English, all of a sudden she makes a new friend who's a member of the church who speaks Korean. You know what I mean? And there's a deeper level to these things. They aren't just casual social get-togethers. Because when you get people together doing something that they love with people who share their values and interests, like, the Spirit has a hard time being restrained in that kind of environment of goodwill and goodness. And you don't know what's going to happen when that sort of ingredient gets together. So I just think it's so cool what you guys are doing. Go ahead, Janet.
I just want to say one more thing. So most of the activities are ongoing, but kind of like you did the roadshow or the play. Some of them are just single activities. Maybe there's a performance at a local theater that, let's all go and maybe put that out there, or the hike. Maybe it's one special hike or one special, the young men's. Well, you wouldn't invite anybody. You wouldn't put that up to the stake, but it's something like that, right? Or like Joel doing some cruise thing, right? So that's a kind of a one-off thing, right?
Yeah.
So they don't have to be ongoing. Just somebody say,
Yeah.
you're interested in this. Well, you tell us where you're going, the information, and Joel will publicize it because he's just awesome.
That's fantastic.
Last month we had the Environmental Stewards Group, Angela Walkowski. She had her vegetarian potluck, near the beach, and so these one-time things. That's another thing. As we've got so many groups, and the newsletter was starting to become repetitive, we decided just to list the groups on a regular basis. And the ones that just have special, one-time event that's not at the same place, like the hike that's coming up, they would have their own images. Now we still have all the images, they're just not in the bulletin.
I see.
The links are there, so the missionaries can still share those.
Well, I just think it's so great. Well, honestly, guys, thank you guys so much for coming on and sharing this. Joel, I especially want to, if you're comfortable with this, to leave some kind of contact information or stake contact information in case someone who watches this is curious about how things went in your stake. Are you open to people reaching out and asking you, hey, how did you overcome this, or have any questions for you about what you guys are doing?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Well, if you just, if you want to give me that, I can put it in the show notes, whatever email you want, and we'll make sure that people can get in touch with you.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
And the thing that's nice about Joel is he's so tech, right? Everything's tech. Like Colleen's saying, the QR codes or the links and all. Yeah. So it's so easy to use for everybody.
And what's wild is I bet you can find somebody in your stake who has a passion for technology who might even be able to help with some of this stuff.
Well, and the reason for the tech was, again, to engage the younger generation, and also the missionaries. And the full-time missionaries that do social media. We've got authorization from the stake presidency to go ahead and start on the ones that the group leaders are okay with, that we can put that on Eventbrite, without any, anyway. So social media is the way of the future. And many of these have been posted on our social media website at the stake level by our social media specialist.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, you guys are honestly doing wonderful things. You guys are building the kingdom. There's no doubt about it. Gathering saints together the way you guys are and providing these kinds of experiences. I mean, I know that the experiences that I had as a youth on some of these sort of more interest-based activities, they really impacted me. And I just hope that if we can expand that to allow those kind of experiences to continue to happen, I think that we're going to touch people and bring the Spirit into people's lives.
We share the same hope.
I do want to say one more thing too. The interest-based part, a lot of times means that you have a diverse group together, right? So you have the girl who likes rock climbing, but then maybe there's a 50-year-old woman, or, so you have the youth together with the adults or kids or whatever. If they got the same interest, they're going to bond. And I really think that the intergenerational component of that is really wonderful.
And Colleen, who doesn't love Disneyland? I'm sure that you can get people of all age groups going to Disneyland.
I called because I got the papers from Joel when they first passed out the papers before we went to the Linktree thing. And so I called every person that, on all the sheets. And oh my gosh, so many kids. Like, this kid is saving his money to get a Disneyland ticket to go to Disneyland with us. Is that the cutest thing ever?
That's so cool.
And him and his mom are going to, he's saving his money so he can go.
That's so cool.
Excited.
That's so awesome. And I guarantee you, everyone in that group are going to want to make sure that kid has the best time when he's there, because they know him. They know this is special to him. How cool. Well, you guys, we're about out of time. So I just want to thank you guys for what you're doing. And make sure that anyone who, again, to me, it's about the principles behind this. That's really what this is about. It isn't about some missionary ploy or something, though people may get baptized. It's about loving our fellow man. It's about gathering the saints. It's about becoming one. It's about combating the loneliness that people experience and giving the world something that it desperately needs, in my opinion, in a world that is becoming ever more divisive, ever more disconnected from one another. And so I don't think anyone should ever underestimate this as just, oh, these are just, little things where we have fun together. I think that by small things, great things come to pass. So thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.